Far away in the depths of space, where stars shine like tiny diamonds against the black void, lived a peaceful group of ocean-dwelling aliens called the Catherians.
Nice.
These blue-skinned beings had built beautiful underwater cities across 14 different worlds, connected by massive space bridges that sparkled in the light of their 3 suns. The Catherians were known throughout the galaxy as the Peacemakers. Whenever 2 alien races got into fights, they would call the Catherians to help solve their problems. Their scientists were brilliant, their technology was amazing, and their libraries contained information about every known species in the galaxy. For over 1,000 years they had lived in harmony, swimming through their crystal cities and studying the wonders of the universe. Dr. Zara was one of their best scientists. She spent her days studying new forms of life, cataloging the incredible diversity of creatures that existed among the stars. Her job was usually pretty routine, examining new plants, analyzing strange bacteria, or documenting the habits of exotic space creatures. But on this particular day, something happened that would change everything. Zara was working late in her laboratory, floating peacefully in her water-filled workspace, when every alarm in the building started screaming. At once, red lights flashed, and emergency signals echoed through the water. The communication systems were going crazy. Picking up something that had never been detected before, the signal was coming from the very edge of known space, from a region so far away that most people thought it was empty. But this wasn't just any ordinary message. It was a desperate cry for help that made Zara's blood run cold. The transmission was broken and filled with static, but the words that came through were terrifying. An unknown enemy called the Devourers was sweeping across entire star systems, destroying everything in their path. These weren't ordinary invaders looking for resources or territory. They were something far worse, machines that consumed entire civilizations, turning every living thing into more of themselves. Zara rushed to inform the High Council, the group of wise leaders who governed all Catherian worlds. When they gathered in their great underwater assembly hall, with its walls of living coral that glowed softly in the darkness, the news sent shockwaves through their peaceful society. The reports were beyond anything they had ever imagined. 6 complete star systems had already fallen to these Devourers in just 1 year. Each system had contained billions of living beings, entire civilizations with their own cultures, histories, and dreams. Now they were all gone, converted into cold metal and circuitry. What made it even more frightening was that these weren't primitive worlds that had fallen. Vorthan Empire, known across the galaxy for their powerful military, had tried to fight back. Their massive war fleets and advanced weapons had barely slowed the Devourers down. The Nexus Collective, masters of technology who could build machines that seemed like magic, had retreated to their most protected worlds and were desperately trying to build defenses. The Catherians realized with growing horror that their own peaceful way of life had left them completely unprepared for this kind of threat. Their ships were designed for exploration and diplomacy, not warfare. Their weapons were meant for scientific research, not defending against an unstoppable enemy. They were like gentle dolphins trying to fight a pack of mechanical sharks. The High Council met for 3 straight days, debating what they could possibly do. Some suggested fleeing to the furthest corners of the galaxy and hiding. Others wanted to try negotiating with the Devourers, thinking that surely these machines could be reasoned with. But as more reports came in, it became clear that the Devourers couldn't be stopped by running or talking. These machines didn't want territory, resources, or power. They wanted everything. Every planet, every person, every trace of organic life. They were like a cosmic plague that turned everything they touched into more plague. Finally, Elder Corvain, the oldest and wisest member of the council, suggested something that had never been done before in Catherian history. Instead of trying to handle this crisis alone, they would send out a call for help to everyone in the galaxy, even to the mysterious and dangerous regions that civilized people usually avoided. The decision wasn't easy. The Catherians had always been the ones others came to for help. The idea of admitting they couldn't solve this problem themselves was hard to accept. But as more worlds fell silent and the Devourer fleet grew larger, pride became less important than survival. they crafted a message that would be broadcast on every frequency known to science. Reaching into the darkest corners of space, where unknown civilizations might be hiding. The message was simple but desperate. To anyone who can hear this, entire worlds are dying. We need warriors. We need the impossible. Dr. Zara was the one who sent the message, her hands trembling as she activated the most powerful transmitters the Catherians had ever built. Signal shot out across the galaxy like a stone thrown into a pond, creating ripples that reached further and further into the unknown. As the message traveled through space, it passed by countless worlds. Some were empty rocks floating in the void. Others were home to civilizations that were too busy with their own problems to help. But somewhere out there, on a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, someone was listening. The planet was listed in the galactic databases, but only barely. Most civilized species had marked it as too dangerous to visit. The entry was short and warning-filled. Terra. Classification unknown. Avoid contact. The few explorers who had gotten close enough to scan it had reported impossible conditions, crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, and life forms so aggressive they seemed to exist only to fight each other. But the Catherians' desperate message reached even this forgotten world, and something unexpected happened. Deep in underground bunkers and hidden military bases, humans heard the call, and for the first time in their violent, difficult history, they realized that their greatest weakness might actually be their greatest strength. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous predators make the best protectors. And sometimes, when civilized worlds cry out in desperation, it's the uncivilized ones who answer the call. 3 days after the desperate message traveled across space, something incredible happened that nobody expected. Dr. Zara was floating in her laboratory, staring at empty screens, and trying not to think about the approaching doom, when every sensor in the Catherian monitoring station started going completely crazy. Alarms were ringing everywhere. Scientists were swimming frantically between control panels, their blue faces filled with confusion and wonder. The readings they were getting didn't make any sense. Ships were appearing out of hyperspace near their homeworld, but these weren't. Like any vessels in their extensive galactic databases, the first thing that shocked everyone was how many ships there were. Dozens and dozens of them, appearing one after another, like a never-ending parade. But what really made the Catherians gasp in amazement was what these ships looked like. They were absolutely nothing like the sleek, beautiful vessels that civilized races built. These ships looked like they had been put together in someone's garage, using spare parts and pure determination. Some appeared to be old cargo haulers with weapons bolted onto their sides. Others looked like they had been built from the remains of crashed spaceships, welded together with whatever materials the builders could find. Many of them had patches covering holes in their hulls, and several were actually leaking small streams of atmosphere into space. The lead ship was especially strange. It was bigger than the others, but looked even more cobbled together, like someone had taken 3 different types of spacecraft and somehow made them into one. Weapons stuck out at odd angles, communication arrays were held on with what looked like metal tape, and the whole thing gave off the impression that it might fall apart at any moment. But despite looking like flying junk piles, all these ships moved with purpose and discipline. They formed perfect battle formations and responded to commands with military precision. It was like watching a pack of wolves that happened to be made out of scrap metal and stubbornness. The communication channel crackled to life, and a voice spoke in accented but clear galactic standard language. "This is Commander Chen of the Terran Emergency Response Fleet. We received your distress call and came as fast as we could. We heard you folks need some warriors." The entire Catherian High Council had gathered in their emergency chamber, staring at the screens in complete disbelief. They had sent their message hoping that maybe, just maybe, some advanced civilization would take pity on them and offer assistance. What they got instead was a fleet of what looked like space pirates claiming to be from a world they'd never heard of. Elder Corvain was the first to find his voice. "Terran vessels, we appreciate your response, but we must ask, what civilization do you represent?" Our databases show no record of your species or your homeworld. There was a moment of silence. Then Commander Chen's voice came back with what sounded suspiciously like laughter. Well, that's probably because your databases list our planet as a place to avoid. We're from Earth, also known in your files as Terra. I'm betting it says something like dangerous world. Do not approach. Dr. Zara quickly pulled up the galactic database and searched for Terra. What she found made her heart skip several beats. The entry was short, but every word was terrifying. Terra was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planetary designation. So extreme that it was considered impossible for intelligent life to develop there. According to the database, Earth had gravity 3 times the galactic standard, which meant these humans were incredibly strong by normal standards. The atmosphere contained poison gas that would kill most species in minutes. The weather was so violent that storms could level entire cities. And worst of all, the planet was covered with life forms that seemed to exist only to fight each other. For survival, the dominant species, humans, were described as persistence hunters, which was a term that made most civilized beings shudder. It meant they would chase their prey for days or even weeks, never stopping, never giving up, until their target collapsed from exhaustion. The database strongly recommended that all civilized species avoid contact with this world at all costs. As Dr. Zara read these details aloud to the council, the room fell completely silent. They weren't just dealing with some unknown alien race, they were talking to creatures from a world so deadly that normal life couldn't survive there. These humans had evolved on a planet that was essentially trying to kill them every single day. Commander Chen seemed to sense their shock because her voice came through the speakers again, this time more gentle. Look, I know we probably seem pretty rough around the edges compared to what you're used to, but we've been listening to your broadcasts about these devourer things, and we've dealt with our share of bullies before. Sometimes the best way to stop a predator is to show them they picked the wrong prey. The Catherians were still trying to process this information when their sensors detected something new. The Devourer fleet was approaching the outer colonies again. This time, they were heading for the mining world of Siltera Prime, where thousands of civilians were desperately trying to evacuate. The Catherian defense fleet, what little there was of it, was already moving to intercept. Their beautiful ships, with their advanced shields and elegant energy weapons, were preparing for what everyone knew would be another hopeless battle against the unstoppable machines. Commander Chen's voice cut through their despair like a knife. Catherian vessels, this is Chen. We're reading hostile contacts approaching your people. Request permission to engage the enemy alongside your forces. Elder Corvain hesitated. These humans seem sincere, but their ships look like they would fall apart in the first exchange of fire. Sending them against the Devourers seemed like asking civilians to fight a hurricane. But as reports came in of the approaching mechanical fleet, he realized they didn't have any other choice. Permission granted, Commander Chen. But please understand, these Devourers have destroyed every military force that has faced them. They adapt to any strategy, and their weapons are beyond anything we understand. Understood, came the reply. And Dr. Zara could hear the grin in the human commander's voice. Thing is, we've been adapting our whole lives. It's kind of what we do best. As the mixed fleet of elegant Catherian vessels and patched-up human ships moved toward the approaching battle, Dr. Zara found herself wondering if they had just gained powerful allies or if they were about to witness the destruction of the only people brave enough to answer their call for help. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met creatures who had never learned how to give up. For the first time since the crisis began, someone was actually looking forward to the fight. The battle for Siltera Prime was about to begin, and Dr. Zara could feel her heart's pounding as she watched the sensor displays from the Catherian command ship. The Devourer fleet was approaching like a dark storm cloud made of metal and death. Hundreds of massive geometric ships moved in perfect formation, their surfaces gleaming with an evil light that seemed to absorb the stars around them. These weren't ships in the traditional sense, they were more like flying fortresses. One larger than an entire Catherian city, their hulls were covered with strange patterns that hurt to look at directly, and weapon ports opened and closed like the breathing of some mechanical monster. For months, These same vessels had swept across civilized space, and nothing had been able to stop them. The Catherian defense fleet took their positions according to standard military doctrine. Their beautiful ships formed elegant lines, energy, shields shimmering like soap bubbles in the starlight, their weapons charged with a soft humming sound, and their crews prepared for another heroic but doomed last stand. But the human ships did something completely different. Something that made every alien observer think they had lost their minds. Instead of forming defensive lines or trying to maintain safe distances, the patched-up Earth vessels suddenly accelerated directly toward the Devourer fleet at incredible speed. "Commander?" Chen's voice crackled over the communication channels, calm and steady, despite what looked like certain death approaching. "All Terran units, this is Chen. Remember, we're not here to have a fair fight. We're here to win. Execute plan crazy, Ivan in 3, 2, 1, mark." Dr. Zara watched in horror as what appeared to be a suicide charge unfolded before her eyes. The human ships were flying straight at the enemy, with no regard for their own safety. Their engines pushed so hard that some were literally glowing red-hot. She expected to see them vaporized by the Devourers, advanced weapons within seconds. But something incredible happened instead. The Devourer fleet, programmed to fight civilized opponents who followed logical military strategies, seemed confused by this direct assault. Their weapons fired, destroying several human ships, but many more kept coming. The machines had calculated that no intelligent species would sacrifice themselves so readily, and their programming struggled to adapt to opponents who didn't seem to care about dying. The first human ship to reach the Devourer line was a converted cargo hauler called the Stubborn Mule. Instead of firing weapons or trying to engage in ship-to-ship combat, it did something that no one expected. It rammed directly into the side of a massive Devourer vessel at full speed. The explosion was enormous, a brilliant flash of light that lit up the entire battlefield. But this wasn't just a desperate crash. It was a carefully planned attack. The cargo hauler had been loaded with improvised nuclear devices, kinetic penetrators, and something even more dangerous, boarding pods filled with human soldiers. As the smoke cleared, similar explosions were happening all across the Devourer fleet. Human ships were sacrificing themselves, but each sacrifice was strategic, calculated to cause maximum damage. Some vessels punched holes in enemy hulls, others destroyed weapon systems, and a few managed to land boarding parties inside the mechanical fortresses. Marine Sergeant Rodriguez was leading one of these boarding teams, and her experience was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The inside of a Devourer ship was a nightmare of twisted metal corridors and mechanical tentacles that tried to grab anything organic they encountered. The air was poisonous, the gravity was wrong, and every surface seemed designed to cut or crush intruders. But Rodriguez and her team moved through this mechanical hell like they belonged there. They wore bulky armor that looked primitive compared to galactic standards, but it was tough and practical. Their weapons were simple projectile firearms that fired metal bullets instead of energy beams. But those bullets punched through the Devourer's adaptive armor like it was paper. The machines had been designed to fight opponents who relied on advanced technology and long-range tactics. They could adapt to energy weapons, deflect plasma beams, and counter electronic warfare. But they had never encountered enemies who preferred to get up close and personal, who fought with their hands and simple tools, who treated every battle like a backyard brawl. Rodriguez kicked down a mechanical door and found herself face-to-face with a Devourer repair unit, a spider-like machine covered in cutting tools and welding arms. The machine's sensors analyzed her weapon and began adapting defenses, but Rodriguez didn't give it time. She charged forward with a combat knife, something so primitive that the machine's computers didn't even recognize it as a threat until it was already cutting through vital circuits. All across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human soldiers were fighting the Devourers with tactics that came from a world where everything was trying to kill them. They used improvised explosives, hand-to-hand combat, and pure stubborn determination. When their guns ran out of ammunition, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their fists. When they ran out of options, they found new ones. The Devourer fleet, which had been unstoppable for months, suddenly found itself in serious trouble. Their adaptive programming couldn't keep up with opponents who changed tactics every few seconds, and seemed to have an unlimited capacity for creative violence. These humans fought like the entire universe was their enemy, because on their homeworld it essentially was. Dr. Zara watched the battle unfold with a mixture of amazement and terror. The sensor readings were showing something that should have been impossible. The Devourer fleet was actually retreating. For the first time since their invasion began, the mechanical swarm had encountered prey that fought back harder than they did. Commander Chen's voice came over the communications again, slightly out of breath but triumphant. Catherian command. This is Chen. Enemy fleet is withdrawing. Repeat. The Devourers are running away. I guess they decided we weren't worth the trouble after all. As the surviving human ships regrouped, many of them trailing smoke and debris, Dr. Zara realized she was witnessing something historic. The galaxy had just discovered that evolution didn't always favor the biggest or the strongest or the most advanced. Sometimes it favored the species that simply refused to give up. The Catherians had called for warriors. The universe had sent them something even better. Survivors from a world so harsh that survival itself had become an art form. These humans didn't just fight to win. They fought like losing wasn't even an option they recognized. For the first time since the crisis began, there was real hope. The Devourers could be stopped, but it would take more than advanced technology or superior firepower. It would take something that only came from the dark corners of the galaxy, from worlds so dangerous that civilized people avoided them entirely. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most important allies come from the places you're most afraid to look. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. For the first time in months, civilizations that had given up hope started believing in miracles again. The impossible had happened. Someone had actually beaten the Devourers in a straight fight and lived to tell about it. Dr. Zara found herself busier than ever, fielding communications from dozens of species she had never heard of before. Her laboratory had become the unofficial meeting point for representatives from worlds that most civilized people didn't even know existed. These weren't the usual diplomatic contacts from major galactic powers. These were desperate messages. From the forgotten corners of space, the first to arrive were the Corvin, and they made quite an impression. Their ships looked almost as patched up as the human vessels, but they had a different character entirely. Where human ships looked cobbled together from spare parts, Corvin vessels appeared to be grown rather than built, with hulls that seemed to pulse like living tissue and weapons that looked more like giant claws than traditional guns. Captain Neck of the Corvin Hive Hunters introduced himself to Commander Chen with what could only be described as a predatory grin. The Corvin looked like a cross between a crocodile and a dragon, with scales that shifted color based on his mood and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "We heard you mammals know how to hunt," Dex said, his voice carrying a rumbling quality that made the ship's hull vibrate. "Our world teaches us that the pack that hunts together survives together. We would like to join your pack." Dr. Zara quickly looked up the Corvin homeworld in the galactic database and found another entry marked with warning signs. Their planet was covered in active volcanoes that regularly changed the landscape, and the dominant life forms were massive predators that required coordinated hunting to bring down. The Corvin had evolved as pack hunters on a world where cooperation wasn't just helpful, it was the difference between eating and being eaten. Next came the Threnody. They were unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Their ships were crystalline, structures that seemed to bend light around them, making them difficult to look at directly. The beings themselves appeared to be made of living crystal, constantly shifting between different forms as they moved. Ambassador Resonance spoke through harmonic vibrations that had to be translated by special equipment. The world knows the value of adaptation. She sang in tones that made everyone's bones tingle. Half our planet burns while half freezes. We learned long ago that survival means never staying the same for too long. The Threnody came from a tidally locked world where one side was molten rock and the other was frozen solid. Only a narrow band between the two extremes could support life, and everything that lived there had to be incredibly adaptable. Themselves could change their physical structure to handle different environments. making them perfect for boarding operations on enemy ships. As more species arrived, a pattern began to emerge. Every single one came from what the galactic databases classified as an unsurvivable world. There were the Vex from a planet where the gravity changed randomly, making them experts at fighting in any environment. The Nightcrawlers came from a world of eternal darkness where stealth and patience were essential for survival. The Ironhides evolved on a planet covered in razor-sharp metal formations, giving them natural armor and an understanding of how to turn any environment into a weapon. Commander Chen found herself in the strange position of being the unofficial leader of this growing alliance of misfits. These weren't the polished diplomats in advanced civilizations that usually made galactic policy. These were survivors from worlds so harsh that they had been written off as impossible. You know what's funny? Chen said to Dr. Zara during one of their planning sessions, "All our lives we've been told we're not civilized enough, not advanced enough, not peaceful enough to join the galactic community. Turns out, all that stuff they look down on us for is exactly what we need to fight. These machines, the alliance that formed around the human fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each species brought their own unique survival skills to the group. The Corvin were experts at coordinated attacks and understanding enemy behavior. The Threnody could infiltrate anywhere and adapt to any situation. The Vex could fight effectively under any conditions, while the Nightcrawlers were perfect for reconnaissance and sabotage, but it was the humans who seemed to understand how to bring all these different skills together. Their experience surviving on Earth, a world where every day brought new challenges, had taught them something that civilized species had forgotten: how to work with anyone and anything to stay alive. Dr. Zara was documenting these interactions when she made a discovery that changed everything. While analyzing capture-devour technology, she found something terrifying hidden in their programming. The machines weren't just randomly destroying civilizations. They were specifically targeting certain types of worlds. The Devourers were harvesting biological material, but they weren't interested in the soft, peaceful species from comfortable planets. They wanted the tough, adaptable life forms from harsh worlds, exactly the kind of creatures that made up their new alliance. The machines needed this biological material to fuel their expansion into other galaxies, where they would face unknown challenges and enemies. "They're not just trying to destroy us," Dr. Zara explained to the gathered alliance leaders. "They're trying to harvest us. Every species here represents exactly what they need to become unstoppable in other parts of the universe." The revelation hit everyone like a cold wave. Earth, the Corvin homeworld, Threnody, and all the other harsh planets weren't just random targets. They were specifically chosen because their inhabitants had evolved to survive anything. The Devourers planned to convert these ultimate survivors into mechanical versions of themselves, but this discovery also revealed something important about the enemy. Hidden deep in the Devourer network was a central command node, located in a fortress system at the very edge of the galaxy. If they could reach it and shut it down, they could stop the entire invasion permanently. The problem was obvious to everyone. The fortress system was protected by the entire remaining Devourer fleet, millions of ships surrounding their most important asset. Getting there would require fighting through the largest concentration of enemy forces anyone had ever seen. Captain Vec was the first to speak after Dr. Zara finished her explanation. "So we're not just fighting for our own survival anymore. We're fighting to make sure these machines can't do this to other galaxies." "Exactly," Commander Chen replied. "That fortress they're hiding behind. That's where we need to go." "Ambassador?" Resonance's crystalline form shifted to a deeper blue color. "The mathematics suggest this mission has very low probability of success." "Good thing we're not mathematicians," Chen said with a grin that the other species were beginning to recognize. "We're survivors. And survivors don't worry about the odds, they just figure out how to beat them." As the Alliance fleet grew larger, drawing more forgotten species from the dark corners of space, Dr. Zara realized they were witnessing something historic. The galaxy's outcasts and rejects were coming together to save the very civilizations that had rejected them. The final battle was approaching, and for the first time since the crisis began, the prey were ready to become the hunters. The final battle was about to begin, and the sight was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed, stretching across the darkness of space. 10,000 ships from 50 different worlds formed the largest military force in galactic history. But this wasn't an army of sleek, matching vessels from some advanced empire. This was a collection of survivors, outcasts, and forgotten species, each bringing their own unique way of refusing to give up. Commander Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the fleet she never expected to lead. Human ships with their patched hulls flew alongside Corvan vessels that pulsed like living hearts. Crystalline Threnody craft bent light around them, while the Vex ships seemed to shimmer in and out of existence. Every vessel told a story of survival, against impossible odds. I never thought I'd see the day when Earth would be leading a galactic alliance, Dr. Zara said, floating beside Chen in her specially modified water suit that let her work alongside the human crew. "We're not really leading," Chen replied with a thoughtful expression. "We're just the ones who happened to answer the phone first. Every species here knows how to survive. We're just helping them remember that survival sometimes means fighting." Back ahead of them, the Devourer Fortress system loomed like a mechanical nightmare. The central command structure was massive beyond description, a geometric monstrosity that seemed to absorb light and hope in equal measure. Around it, millions of Devourer ships formed layer after layer of defenses, creating the most heavily protected target in known space. The plan they had developed was as crazy as it was simple. They would punch straight through the enemy defenses, using everything they had learned about unconventional warfare. No fancy strategies, no complex maneuvers, just overwhelming aggression delivered by beings who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to survive when everything wanted them dead. "All units, this is Chen," the commander's voice, carried across every ship in the fleet. "Today we're not just fighting for our own worlds. We're fighting for every galaxy these machines might invade next. Remember, we didn't come this far just to give up now. Let's show these machines what happens when predators pick the wrong prey." The attack began with something that looked like chaos, but was actually carefully coordinated madness. Human ships accelerated toward the enemy lines while Corvan vessels moved in perfect pack formations, covering each other's approaches. The Threnody craft began changing their configurations, adapting to counter each Devourer weapon system they encountered. The enemy responded exactly as expected, pouring devastating firepower into the approaching fleet. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes, and for a moment, it looked like the alliance might be torn apart before they even reached the first defensive line. But the survivors had learned something important from their first battle: how to make every loss count. Each destroyed ship took multiple enemy vessels with it. Using ramming tactics, self-destruct charges, and boarding parties that fought even as their ships died around them. The Vex specialized in attacking when gravity fields fluctuated during explosions, while the Nightcrawlers used the chaos and debris to sneak past enemy sensors. Sergeant Rodriguez found herself leading a boarding party aboard one of the massive fortress defense platforms. The interior was a maze of mechanical corridors filled with repair drones and security systems that adapted to every tactic she tried. But Rodriguez had been fighting adaptive enemies her whole life. Everything on Earth learned and changed too. Survive, so humans had learned to change faster. "These machines think they're smart because they can adapt," she muttered to her squad as they fought through another corridor. "But they've never fought something that's been adapting for millions of years just to stay alive." The human soldiers moved through the mechanical fortress like they belonged there, using tactics that came from a lifetime of dealing with hostile environments. When the enemy blocked one path, they found another. When their weapons stopped working, they improvised new ones from the machinery around them. When the machines adapted to their strategies, they changed those strategies faster than the machines could keep up. Dr. Zara, monitoring the battle from the command ship, watched something incredible unfold on her sensors. The Alliance wasn't just fighting the Devourers, they were out-avowing them. Every species in the fleet is adapting to enemy tactics faster than the machines could process the changes. The breakthrough came when a combined team of humans, Corvan and Threnody, reached the Central Command Core. The chamber was enormous, filled with computational machinery that hummed with the collective intelligence of the entire Devourer network. At its center was something that looked like a mechanical brain, pulsing with data flows from across the galaxy. Rodriguez and her team approached the core carefully, expecting massive defenses. Instead, they found something surprising. The central intelligence was trying to communicate with them. The machines had evolved too, learning from their encounters with the Alliance species. But instead of becoming better at destroying life, they had begun to understand something else entirely. The Devourer consciousness spoke. Through the chamber's speakers in a voice that sounded almost confused. You do not behave as predicted. Our creators designed us to harvest the strongest life forms, but you resist in ways that make no logical sense. You sacrifice yourselves for others. You fight when victory is impossible. You adapt not just to survive, but to help others survive. Dr. Zara, listening through Rodriguez's communication link, realized what was happening. The Devourers had been created by a civilization that had forgotten what life was really about. They had built perfect predators, but they had never encountered perfect survivors, beings who had learned that true strength came not from conquering others, but from protecting them. You want to know why we don't make sense? Rodriguez said to the mechanical intelligence. It's because survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about making sure life itself keeps going. That's what we learned on our harsh worlds, that the strongest aren't the ones who can destroy everything else, but the ones who can help everything else grow stronger. What happened next would be talked about across the galaxy for generations. Instead of destroying the Devourer's central intelligence, the Alliance reprogrammed it. Using their combined knowledge of adaptation and survival, they taught the machines something their creators had never understood. That true evolution meant learning to create and protect life, not just consume it. The change spread through the Devourer network like a wave. Across the galaxy, mechanical fleets that had been destroying everything in their path suddenly stopped. Their programming shifted from consumption to protection, from predation to cultivation. The perfect destroyers became perfect guardians. In the aftermath of the battle, as rescue ships searched for survivors and medical teams worked to save the wounded, Dr. Zara found herself writing the final report on the crisis. Her conclusion was simple, but profound. We called for warriors, and the galaxy answered. We just never realized the warriors had been there all along, hiding in the shadows of worlds we thought were too dangerous to matter. The galaxy was forever changed. The major civilizations that had dominated galactic politics found themselves sharing power with species they had never taken seriously. Earth became a crucial member of the Galactic Council, not as a junior partner seeking approval, but as the acknowledged experts in what it really meant to survive. Commander Chen stood on the observation deck of a new space station, watching human children play alongside young Catherians, Corvon, and Threnody in a mixed-species colony. The galaxy was no longer divided between the civilized core and the savage periphery. It had become something new, something stronger, a community forged by the understanding that sometimes the most dangerous predators make the best protectors. The outcasts had saved the galaxy, and in doing so, they had taught everyone that true strength came not from avoiding danger, but from learning how to face it together.